And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with a what is tonight? It's Thursday, a Thursday night edition of UFO News Network Sunday. It's hard keeping these days straight with so much going on. But before I bring in my co-host Chant, and before she brings in our special guest for this evening, I'm going to go through some recent news that I have discovered regarding the Admiral Wilson documents, and this one is a little bit negative as far as the genuineness of these documents. Now, what I want to do is refer you all to page 5 of these documents. If you're listening live, you can go to the Imgur file and take a look for yourself. We've got them up here. Probably not the best to look at, but let's do this. Let's just zoom in on the particular part of the that page 5 that we want to take a closer look at. This is per Admiral Thomas Wilson. Came to test site special area to wrap up projects. He began in 98. Successor can't be bothered right now for a lack of time and knowledge. Did tour audit, say goodbye to folks. Trip set up by NNSA, National Nuclear Security Agency, Rich and Doug. You, EWD, meaning Eric Davis, know them, AFIO members. Told about how new Las Vegas chapter needed guest speakers for chapter public venue, raise money, etc. Okay, so Rich and Doug. We've got that Rich and Doug name, and I mentioned on Sunday, I think I knew who Rich was, and perusing through the online documentation at the AFIO site, I was able to find their newsletter for the year 2002 that, in fact, covered some interesting information, and let's take a closer look at that right now. Okay, so there we see page 14 from the 2002 AFIO newsletter, and let me get over to one that I can look at a little bit more clearly, and what we see is obviously little monthly reports for the month of October of 2002, what the different chapters of AFIO around the country are up to. And it seems like whenever they have a special speaker come in, they mention it. Like this particular chapter here, I cut off the location, but they've brought in Michael Salazar. The Florida Suncoast chapter looks like they brought in a guy named Bob Sumner. This chapter here, well, they bring in guest speakers. I mean, that's what these kind of organizations do. Here's a real interesting guest speaker for the AFIO New England chapter in October 2002. You had retired Major General Ed Thompson speaking about the U.S. remote viewing program. So that's kind of interesting. So you never know what you might find when you go through some of this old documentation. But bottom right, you look very closely. We've got at the very looks like there are a couple of chapters in Nevada. One is North Sierra chapter, and it looks like their kickoff meeting. So it seems like in September, this was perhaps a new AFIO chapter. And then at the very bottom right, in October, the new AFIO Las Vegas chapter held its first meeting. So that part of the document checks out, that it was a new chapter of this organization, AFIO. That checks out as far as, perhaps a reason that Admiral Wilson might go to Vegas, but it seems to me the implication in what he's telling Davis per these notes is that he's going out there, he's there to speak, he's there to help generate membership and get the organization off to a good start, yet it doesn't mention anything in there about what happened at this October meeting. Doesn't say that Admiral Wilson was there. You would think, why would you keep something like that a secret? Who would care? It doesn't really matter. He's going out. No, nobody knows he's going out, and he's going to reveal all to Eric Davis. He's out there on some old government business he wants to clear up, and he can also help out these AFIO guys get their new chapter started in Vegas. But it doesn't say anything about that. It says in October, the new AFIO Las Vegas chapter held its first meeting. But doesn't say anything that happened at the meeting. Again, you would think that if Wilson was there and he was supposedly in Vegas on October the 6th, these guys, Doug and Rich, I would certainly have to think that Rich is exactly who I suspected he was, Richard L. Cohn, the president of the chapter. Why wouldn't you bring Wilson out to your very first meeting and have him speak at your very first meeting? Why wouldn't you do that? And if he did do that, why was there no mention in it in this little snippet? So there's that. A little bit of news, a little tough, I think, for the folks who who are talking about all this. So let's go over to Chant Hannah. And Chant, come on in, and let's get to our special guest for the evening.
Okay, Frank, thank you so much. By the way, I think your audio was just a little bit broken up there. I'm not sure.
Okay,
you might want to check
on
that.
My sound levels are okay on my end, so.
Yeah, I just heard a little bit of breaks while you're talking, but we do have a special guest on tonight, and we have interviewed her before. Her name is Melinda Leslie. She really needs no introduction at all. She's very well known in the UFO community, and but I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of background on her, just in case that we have folks who have never heard of her before. She's an investigator in the field of ufology with 30 years of experience and researched individuals involved in its cover-up for 28 years. For 9 years, she has been the owner of UFO sighting tours in Sedona, Arizona, where she has conducted over 1,050 tours with the use of military night vision goggles. To date, Melinda's 7,500 tour clients have felt they have always had true UFO sightings on every tour except for only one. Melinda is a UFO abductee and has been public with her own extraterrestrial and covert ops human abduction experiences for almost 30 years and is considered by many to be the authority on covert military and intelligence agency involvement in UFO abduction cases. Both her research and personal experiences have been featured in 24 books by prominent authors in ufology. Melinda has lectured for numerous organizations, including UFO MegaCon, UFOCon, Contact in the Desert, International UFO Congress, MUFON Chapters, the X Conference, the Bay Area UFO Expo, the Whole Life Expo, and more. She is a frequent guest on radio shows, including as a repeat on Coast to Coast AM, appeared on several television shows, and is featured in the new film documentary Extraordinary: The Seeding. And we will definitely show you the link to that, and also give you the link to her UFOsightingtours.com and the film trailer to The Seeding. Welcome, Melinda. How are you doing this evening? Thank you so much for coming in to join us tonight from the beautiful area of Arizona, Sedona.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chant, for having me, and Frank, too. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, I've actually been to Sedona many times. It's such a beautiful area. I bet you love living out there.
I do. I had come to Sedona on and off since the early 80s. It was like my second trip I ever had here. I thought, one day I got to live here. I adored it so much. And about 9 years ago, everything came together in my life to make that possible, and here I am. And then I've been doing my business for about 8.5 years now, quite successfully, luckily. So there we go.
That is so fantastic. Now, I just kind of wanted to get straight to it. There's an interesting topic, kind of something that's been trending heavily in the UFO community. And I understand that you wanted to talk a little bit about that topic. Do you want to go ahead and touch on that now?
Sure. Are you referring to the documents?
Yep. Let's go ahead and start with the documents. That would be great. Thank you so much.
Well, I think for people to know what got me involved in this story, a week ago, I think it's been just over a week since the kind of big release, even though certain documents had been released prior to that, and then even the main document so far in question, the Wilson one, had been released privately, but had not kind of made it into the minds and into the view of a lot of people in the field. The few people who had received it before were sitting on it for a variety of reasons. I've talked to many of them, and they had good reasons for why they were waiting. It was mostly, let's see if it comes out on its own. Let's see if stuff comes up that can verify it. They all knew that they were sitting on a virtual time bomb, if you will. So, but what had happened with me, now I've been researching and investigating a 40-year history of, which I've been doing with a research partner, Randy Kopeng, and I've been very involved in the UFO field for about 30 years now. Started with sightings out at Area 51 and discovering I was an abductee, and then discovering I was a MILAB abductee. That's MIL for military and AB for abduction, and trying to come to terms with that. But in the midst of my MILAB experience and research, I fell kind of into something. Which is a long story, which this whole program doesn't need to be about. I do have an additional link that I know Chant and Frank, I believe, I haven't looked, but I believe they put this up for me. Besides to the new documentary movie I'm in about the hybridization program in Abduction. It's called The Seeding, which is going to be, well, it's called Extraordinary, The Seeding. It is an incredible movie. I've seen it. And it comes out September 3rd to be released on all pay-per-view formats on September 3rd. And I'm going to be sharing that widely when that happens. But there is a Facebook page for The Seeding. So I recommend everybody look up Extraordinary The Seeding on Facebook. Join that page. You'll get the updates. And it is currently out where people can pre-order it, pre-order to own it. And it's like, what, 12 or 13 bucks. Pre-order to actually own it on Amazon Prime and iTunes. I believe, Vimeo, not on Amazon Prime. I think it's on Vimeo, pre-order and iTunes. But again, if you go to the Facebook page for Extraordinary The Seeding, and we have a link there to the trailer, as she said. Now, but the other thing is, and of course, a link to my website for my UFO sighting tours here in Sedona. So that link is up there. But the third link is a lecture I gave, which I gave a year and a half ago for Lorian Fenton, producer of what is called UFO Con. That's not Alien Con. That's the one going on this current weekend at the LA Convention Center. But no, UFO Con in the Bay Area. A smaller conference, but very important. And she had me give a complete presentation for the first time ever on my 40-year history, I should say Randy Kopang's, and my research of the 40-year history of the working group. And so I'm going to occasionally be referencing that. Please, people, watch that presentation. Everything that is going on in the current disclosure story, combined with everything going on with these documents, will be much better understood by everyone. And I'm not doing this to toot my own horn. Oh, it's my lecture. No, it's about the evidence in there and the research. And it's a 28-year research project by Randy and I. We started it 28 years ago, but it covers the 40-year history, at least what we could document is about 40-year history of this group. And they've been continually involved in the UFO research subject from then up to the present day. Now, I can get more into that later, but because of that knowledge and because of that history, there's a lot of information that I know. So on the Saturday, now I know that the Wilson document came out, a week ago on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It was the Thursday, a week ago today.
Thursday.
Or 2 weeks ago today.
Well, it was Thursday, yeah. I believe it was late Thursday night. It was technically after midnight, so in other words, it was early Friday morning, is my understanding, is when it first came up and showed up, I believe at that point in Reddit, in a Young Guns discussion group on Reddit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it came out sometime back on a...
in April. In April, it came out on Imgur. It was posted on Imgur back in April. And then Grant and a few other researchers were given various documents or pages of documents approximately a year ago or on and off over the last year leading up to this. But again, those people sat on it. Grant had approached Michael Hall as a lawyer, as his attorney, to say, do I need to be careful of anything here? I don't want to break any laws, this and that. And Michael said, you can publish it in your upcoming book as long as it is redacted, heavily redacted, removing all names, removing certain, individual names of people and group names, etc. And so Grant was going to do that and was quite happy, alluding to the fact he had something, and as you guys know, the story, in case other people out there don't. And then all of a sudden it gets released, Thursday night, Friday morning. And I didn't get whiff of it till really following, and Chant knows, and you do too, Frank, I'm very active in a bunch of Facebook pages dealing with the whole To the Stars Academy, ATIP, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was getting whiff of something. I hadn't looked at it. Finally, I did. Now, jumping to the chase here. Now we know, too, and everyone's saying the Wilson document. I think we need to correct ourselves about that. because these are actually a series of documents, of which there are more to come, that were in the possession of the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell, astronaut Edgar Mitchell.
And how do you know that?
So I think, well, through a number of things. Some of the people who handed copy sets to certain key individuals like Grant have said that, yes, it came out of that.
You mean rigging?
An additional, well, and some others, and not to go into great detail right now, this almost doesn't matter, but yes. So these individuals are saying yes. In addition to the third document, which Grant released, 48 hours ago, yesterday, I believe, 24 hours? No, I think it was maybe day before yesterday. Okay. But Grant released an additional document that he had in his possession, given to him at the time that all of them were given, but he thought this one was important because it is a letter from Robert Bigelow to Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And yet referencing his attending an upcoming meeting, and that meeting was a meeting for NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, and it is clearly on NIDS letterhead, very clearly. And from everything I can see, having had seen past documents referencing their letterhead and everything, that I and others believe that to be legit. And Robert Bigelow wrote this letter. It says at the bottom, it has little initials that show him, and then slash, and then obviously assistant or secretary, having it actually typed it up, having it been in that position for many years in the past myself, I instantly recognize that. And it went to Dr. Edgar Mitchell about his involvement in these upcoming meetings that he was going to be traveling to be a part of for the board of directors and consultants to NIDS. It doesn't state everyone who's going to be involved, but it states a few of the individuals within the context of the letter and the nature of what they were going to be discussing in the meeting, various projects and whatnot. But clearly, this is something that went from Bigelow to Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Most of the key researchers, and yesterday, I've spent over the last 5 days, a lot of hours on the phone with key researchers, with Richard Dolan, with Grant Cameron, with Ray Hernandez, who knew Dr. Edgar Mitchell well and is the director of FREE, the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, and others. So I haven't talked directly to James, but these people, at least Grant and Richard did, etc. So I feel like I know where he stands on it. And etc. So again, and my research partner, Randy Kopang, and attorney Daniel Sheehan, and others. So I'm just, throwing out some names, but not to necessarily name drop but I'm talking to some very responsible people. And we're all in agreement because the evidence suggests that these at least came out of the files of Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And Grant has more documents and more apparently that say, to Edgar Mitchell or referencing that these. So at the time, Dr. Edgar Mitchell was on the board of directors for NIDS. He was actually, my understanding, and I'll stand correct if this is not true, but my understanding is he was a paid consultant at the time, which is why this letter goes to him about his involvement in the meeting. There are some theories that have been expressed to me, or maybe even people with a little bit of insight as to how these got leaked. From what I am hearing, it is not suggesting at this point, we could change this, and this is morphing and changing. Nobody hang your hat on any hypothesis. We don't know enough. I'm just saying this is what the evidence suggests, this is what these key researchers are saying, which is that someone in conjunction with Edgar Mitchell released these. Now, there could be a list of motives, and I list some of those. We can get to those later. That are my thoughts based upon what I know about the subject and what I think some of the motives might be. Ray Hernandez suggested an individual to me that I shared with Richard Dolan. Dolan disagreed with me heavily, but admitted he could be wrong. He didn't actually know, but his evidence suggested maybe not as far as that individual. When I spoke about that same individual with Grant Cameron, he said likely, and if not directly, then that person who certainly had access to Edgar's files, if not in possession of them, may have then passed it along. Now, in an effort to protect either that individual or others involved who may be doing this with really good intentions, obviously risking anything from possible legal action to at least ridicule and even possibly their well-being, life or health threatened. So I agree, and I've talked to all these other researchers about, even if we think we know, even if we're certain at some point we do know, we are not sharing that name. So as of right now, I can just say there's evidence to suggest something, and multiple pieces that make perfect logic sense as to who did this. But going back to my involvement, so that's just kind of a sideline, is, so here Randy and I have been researching this group. I provided an additional document to you guys I'll get into in a minute. But when I saw this on Saturday and I read it for the first time.
Now, what are you talking about now? You're talking about
now the Wilson document.
Okay,
so far, 3 documents have come out. One is really a series of documents in that they are copies of emails. So that is the first one, is the series of emails. And that is about the alien autopsy, Ray Santilli film, et cetera, and that these individuals were having a group. All the individuals mentioned in those at the time were involved either directly or indirectly with NIDS, clearly. So this is a NIDS project, okay? Then, and Dr. Edgar Mitchell is getting copied on the documents because he is active with them at the time, attending meetings, and so everybody's getting copies of everything. It makes perfect sense. And again, I'm not saying that Edgar leaked these or asked them to be, that Dr. Mitchell did this before he died, saying, when I'm gone. I don't think so. I talked to Ray Hernandez extensively about this. He had quite a lengthy discussion to say why he didn't think Edgar would do that, because of who he was and the nature of the man. But could he have, in allowing someone to have have copies of and or access to his files, could that person, upon his passing, have a reason to do this? Absolutely. Or it may even be a group of people. And then they started to get the documents out there to certain researchers, and we don't know, and I don't know. I'll just say I don't know who to this day posted the Wilson document anyways, or even the emails one on Imgur or Reddit. I don't know. I don't think anybody does, or if someone does, they're holding back on that. But for instance, James Rigney has said, I'm not going to disclose who gave this to me. It doesn't matter. It's about the content, and I agree. Everyone's getting hung up, and it's like, you guys, I think all the evidence says that these were NIDS documents that went to Edgar Mitchell. That would make perfect sense for him to be in possession. Grant does say he has a few more that he may release. We believe there may be others. It is alluded to by some of the researchers who were given copies that whoever gave them to him said there are more. And so maybe more are going to be coming out. I think Grant has one more he's going to come forward with, and I believe that I suspect others will come forward. We don't know how many. If it is copies of everything Dr. Mitchell was copied on while his involvement as a paid consultant to NIDS, if he was involved in that organization, he could have been copied everything for whatever period of time that he was involved, and maybe prior to bring him up to speed, and maybe afterwards, because, maybe in case he was going to be involved again. So we don't know how much. But so far, we do know that 3 documents have come out. One is the series of emails. One is one we're calling the Wilson document. That's the second thing. And that, of course, is the interview, Dr. Eric Davis interviewing Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson. And then the third one is the letter from Bigelow to Dr. Edgar Mitchell on NIDS letterhead. So those are the 3 we know about at this point. Now, I didn't know about these other 2 as of Saturday. I had not caught the story of, and I made this clear to Chant, I was unaware of the email saying, I mean, since then I started to get aware of it, of course, and now I've looked at it, but initially I did not know that part. All I know is here's this interview notes. People were calling it transcription, but it's not a word-for-word transcription. It is clearly notes. So parts of it read almost like a transcription, but it's really Dr. Eric Davis's notes of that interview. So I see that on Saturday, and I read it, and instantly something jumps out at me. And in talking now extensively with Grant Cameron for many, many hours on the phone, Grant said it is the thing that immediately jumped out at him. Over a year ago, actually about a year and a half ago, at the same conference where Grant was given these documents by James Rigney, which was not last year's, but the previous year StarWorks conference put on by Paola Harris, that's where he gave these to Grant just prior to us leaving the hotel for him. And I think, Grant was looking at him while on the shuttle to the airport, is my understanding. But regardless, that's when he first saw him. And at that same conference, I had become involved with Grant Cameron in sharing research, had heard him reference some other documents and a history of what we're calling the working group, or more accurately, the Advanced Theoretical Physics Working Group, or the AP Working Group, or the AP Group. Okay, this is all going to matter here in a minute. That I decided, or not just me, Randy Kopang and it was kind of my idea, but I called Randy and I said, Randy, Grant's onto this. He's following it on his website, Presidential UFO or whatever, White House UFO. He's got this history. He knows part of it, but not all of it, and he's right, but we have more, and we can help push his research way down the road. And I think, I love Grant. He's a friend. Let's share this. Randy agreed. So I came with a full set of our complete timeline of research up to that minute, up to that day, to that conference. I was attending anyways, but when I saw Grant was going to be a speaker, it was the perfect opportunity to share that with him. Since then, Grant and I have been in communication and sharing research. We were kind of calling ourselves research partners for a little while, but not really. I just, more loosely than that. So just so people kind of understand. So I knew when Grant saw that, or when he told me, when he saw that document, this immediately jumped out. He had the same reaction to it that I did. And then he went on to read more. And
well,
of
what
course,
was it?
What
do you mean?
Okay.
You had some kind of a positive reaction. What was it?
I admit I wanted to print it out and have it in front of me, but there is, early on, Wilson is saying to Eric Davis, he is saying, okay, well, Oak Shannon said, I can trust you. You're an upstanding guy. Okay. So it's the comments regarding Oak, O-K-E, and his last name is Shannon.
Right. I know he is
S-H-A-N-N-O-N. So, okay. So anyone who's seen the document has seen that. Now, if I started to hear about this and hear people commenting, and eventually the first, I think it was on Sunday, was the first post put up by Richard Dolan referencing this, and it's his infamous smoking gun video that he did, that Richard Dolan had. And then I saw that, but I thought, wait a second, everything I'm seeing out there is addressing different parts of this, but no one's addressing this. No one's addressing the significance of this. And I contacted Grant, and he said, yeah, and I'm like, this is weird, And so I suggested to Grant, I suggested to Attorney Daniel Sheehan and to Randy and some other people, wait a second, I've got this, Randy and I have this missing part. I think I should jump in and add it because I think it's significant, which is that it says, like, here it is, Admiral Wilson telling Eric, okay, I know why you're here. Oak Shannon told me all about the group. He told me about the history, told me about the meeting in 85 at BDM. He mentions that in the interview. He's saying at the meeting at BDM Corporation, which is in Virginia, which happened in 85. He's mentioning that, and he says the AP-10 group. Well, as soon as I see AP, I know that's the advanced physics group. I do not know what the -10 means, in all honesty. I've never come across that in my research. That is new to me. It may mean 10 people were at the initial meeting, maybe. It may mean that the BDM secure file room where they did this was room 10. I don't know. I'm left to speculate about what -10 means, but it says the AP-10 group. And then it goes on to say with the initials JA, and then Shannon's saying, I think JA is a liar and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, anyone who's read it, most researchers right away know that, of course, that refers to John Alexander.
John Alexander, of course.
And John Alexander wrote in 2 of his books, most notably in UFOs, Myths, and Conspiracies, about his involvement in forming this working group and who was in it.
Yeah, and he acknowledged Oak Shannon in one of his books as well.
You got
it. Okay, I have to interrupt you here for a second, Melinda. I want to make it clear that we are not saying that is John Alexander as a fact, that is allegedly him. Because that is definitely one thing I don't want to do with these documents. We don't have any proof that is him, and I don't want to have to deal with any repercussions of that.
Okay. All right.
Legally,
I get that.
That's not the case.
No, I understand. Okay, I'll roll with you there.
All right.
But any seasoned researcher knowing this story, certainly Grant, and all the names I've already mentioned, knew right away who it was. Because, again, now we can state this on the record. John Alexander publishes his involvement in the group. First, it comes out most notably in a book by Howard Bloom about the history of the group, and he mentions some of the names and something about it, and that it met in 85. And, so the first one to really write about it or publicize it in a very open sense, it had been talked about in some closed manner, but openly was Howard Bloom. And then as information got tossed around in ufology about this over the years, that I think that prompted John Alexander to write about it in his book, write like a chapter on it, say, here's the background, and I was the director of it. So he talks about it himself. So we can certainly cite that is clearly in 2 of his books, he's talked about it.
Yes, and I also, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. If you feel like you want to say John Alexander's name, please do so freely. Just please use the word alleged. That's all I ask.
Okay.
Because
well, John says this was my group. He wrote about it. He admits it. He's published it. That's not a secret. Okay. But I knew about this group many, many years before that. Many years before Howard Bloom did. Can't say before he did, but before he wrote about it, before he published it. Randy and I had been following this and were well aware. Bob Brown, the original producer of International UFO Congress before it went over to Open Minds, and then now to Alejandro Rojas and Karen Baird. But before that, when it was just solely Open Minds owned by John Rao, and before that, for many years, of course, for I think it was 25 years, it was owned and operated by initially Bob Brown and Colonel Wendell Stevens until Wendell's passing, and then there was still a board of directors of international researchers involved on its board of directors. Back in the early 90s, they had Randy and I give a presentation at International UFO Congress about our research up to that date. And I laugh now because I said it seemed like we were getting a accumulation of this is our research, this is what we've come up with. And it was like a year or two after the fact, that we're finally going public with it. Little did I know that would be the very beginning of what is continued up into this conversation right now, So going back to reading the Wilson document, that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think it's extremely significant for a number of reasons. It's certainly significant to Randy and I because here is a total separate document, possibly very important, very possibly, allegedly, like you were just saying, out of the files of Edgar Mitchell, who was copied on these because of his involvement with NIDS at the time. It all makes perfect logic sense. And that after his passing, someone took it upon themselves, possibly at his request, probably not, but someone else who knew the importance and knew the timeliness now with the current disclosure story to come out with this. And certainly knowing NID's involvement in the current story, which I can explain more in a minute.
But Melinda, can you explain this really quick? Richard Dolan has said he saw a couple pages of these documents more than 10 years ago, which is well before Edgar Mitchell passed away.
I'm not aware that he's saying more than 10 years ago. If he has said that, that's news to me.
Okay.
I thought it was more recent. I thought he said like 10 months ago. My understanding is Richard Dolan was handed 2 pages 10 months ago, which was well after when Grant was given his set. But Grant, for a lot of reasons, mostly at Michael's direction, sat on his. We understand that. Richard sat on his. He only had 2 pages. He was wondering if more was going to come out. He didn't know what to make of it. He was just kind of waiting to see, is there more? What do I do? Kind of thing. And he only had 2 pages of it, is what he says, which I believe him. And I'm fairly certain he says like 10 months ago. Okay. So going back to, that paragraph immediately hits me, just like it did Grant when he was handed it at leaving the Star Wars conference a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago. So the same thing. So it strikes me, and I'm like, wait a second, and I instantly saw Oak Shannon's name. I had known about that name and its existence in the group prior. Okay, Randy and I had compiled from multiple sources a list of names that we were certain of, and a few others that were probable. And so when Howard Bloom released names, it verified what we had. And then John Alexander, which added a few more names, and it verified what we had in conjunction with others that neither of them have mentioned. So
okay. So if you've got all this, couldn't also a hoaxer have gotten all this and ginned up this particular document, this Wilson document, and it just happened to fall into the hands of Edgar Mitchell? I mean, he's going to keep that, but just because it was in his possession doesn't make it any more or less legitimate.
That third letter, we really feel, Frank, and I'm talking about all those names I've mentioned. Feel very certain, that especially with Grant releasing the third letter, that this is from the files of Edgar Mitchell, who got copied while with NIDS on NIDS correspondence at the time. That's not a big mystery. He was involved. He got copied on the correspondence.
And
that's
not a problem. That's not a problem. But the Wilson document is the one that really has the eye-opening material.
And this speaks to why Eric was there. Eric was currently paid by Bigelow and part of, he was actually on the board for NIDS at the time. So Eric was involved in NIDS. And so when Admiral Wilson is saying, Oak Shannon told me all about the history of the group. I know about the history. I know about the meeting at BDM. And he's letting Eric know it's okay to talk about this. Oak clued me in. Okay? So it's very obviously saying, Oak clued me in. I know about the history. Now, what was news to Randy and I is, yes, we know about Eric's involvement with NIDS. I never had anything saying that Eric had involvement in the working group, which goes back to 85. But here Wilson is saying, Oak Shannon told me, I know all about it. In other words, he's letting Eric know, I know about the history, I know all about it, suggesting that at the very least, I mean, not just suggesting, it absolutely is stating, or greatly implied, that Eric knew all about the history, knew all about it, and thus also implying that maybe Eric is involved. That's a reach, but I can say, okay, he's clearly letting Eric know, I know about the history, and the reference to J.A., there you go, who was director of the group. Okay. So that is Wilson saying, I agree to talk to you. Oak Shannon said, I can trust you. You're a good guy. Security oaths, blah, blah, blah. You're totally reliable. And that all this part which is the history of the group. So suddenly, for the first time in Randy's and my research, there's a link linking Eric to that knowledge, okay? If not involvement, at least to knowing its history. But that would make sense, being his activity with NIDS and all the way to the present, with his working with Hal and et cetera, Atom Project, and go into everything, that he would know all that is not a mystery. But what makes this significant to at least Randy and I, here's a piece of documentation supporting that. So it's not just theory. That is what is so important about the Wilson document, or all three of these docs, is it shows the depth of knowledge and interest by these individuals. And a lot of things that have been speculated at for years or hinted to, we now have documentation in support of. So these become now evidence to back up what many people already knew. But that's
okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I don't think that equals evidence necessarily. I'll tell you why. If these documents did come from Edgar Mitchell's files, which, by the way, do we have evidence that they came from his files? That's just a yes or no question. Do we have evidence that these letters came from his files?
The Bigelow letter is addressed to him.
Okay, I'm asking about, say, for example, the alien autopsy memo and also the smoking gun doc.
Well, because Edgar Mitchell's is in that list of people that would have received. I know, but that would have been CC'd on stuff.
But do we have? I know that. But
we have evidence that Edgar Mitchell was a member of NIDS. That's not a secret. Edgar Mitchell was a consulting member of NIDS.
I never asked that. I asked, do we have evidence if these letters came from the estate of Edgar Mitchell, his files?
We have evidence in that one of the documents is addressed.
But it's not the alien autopsy doc, and it's not the smoking gun doc either.
No, it's
right?
the third
okay,
one.
So we've
the
established that. Let's
but they
be
were
clear.
given. They were given to Grant at the same time together.
I understand that, but let's be clear. There has been no evidence.
You guys. I don't want to belittle.
I'm not,
yes, I understand what you're saying, and I know you're trying to be clear, but I think we need to move
Melinda,
beyond these little things.
Too, because I question does not mean I'm belittling. The reason why I'm asking,
I get you, Chan. I'm sorry.
Is because, see, this is the thing. I want to make this clear to everybody who's listening to this broadcast. When a researcher asks for evidence, there should be nothing wrong with that. Now, when I ask whether there's evidence regarding the alien autopsy doc and the smoking gun doc, also known as the Core Secrets doc, that Michael J. Hall went ahead and went over with us a few times, I think in 3 different broadcasts, actually 3 different shows. If people don't know what they are, I'll go ahead and provide links to those later in our broadcast. That smoking gun doc details a journal of Eric Davis talking about certain things, and then injected in the middle of that 15 or 17 page journal, allegedly written by Eric Davis, there is a letter allegedly written by Miller to Eric Davis, and that doc and the alien autopsy doc, which allegedly was a series of emails by Kit Green, Colm Kelleher, and a few other people.
I see what you're saying.
There's no evidence to provide.
And I want to stick to the evidence that I have. So I want to dial this back
let me
to say, don't ask me to speculate on things I don't know.
I'm not asking
All I can say is third piece in Grant's possession is addressed to Edgar Mitchell.
Right.
Yeah, I know
that. A gentleman who knew Edgar Mitchell closely, who had conversations with him regarding these, namely Ray Hernandez.
I'm just asking.
Ray Hernandez says, I'm aware of these things all being in Edgar's possession. We talked about them. Edgar talked about his communications with NIDS. And he says this is all absolutely consistent with objects that Dr. Mitchell had in his possession.
Okay,
so I'm saying there's an internal logic here. I'm just saying this is what it looks like. I know what you're saying. I can't produce that. Let me get back to the evidence that I do have. Okay.
But I had a question, and that is part and parcel of my question. If there is no evidence to provide that the alien autopsy doc and the smoking gun doc was actually retrieved through, like, if there's no proof of that or evidence that they were actually retrieved from Edgar Mitchell's files or his estate, I mean, real evidence,
Okay.
then
There's
that's a
circumstantial
point
evidence. That's what we're talking about. But again, I don't know. So I can just sit here and say, I don't know. I'm not on the interview to discuss that. I don't know.
I still have to make my point.
When I'm being clear, I don't know. So,
okay,
so all I can say is the third piece that was given all as one grouping,
yes.
okay, was clearly states that it was sent to Edgar Mitchell. I think there's
but Melinda, it's certainly possible. It's certainly
being familiar. You guys, you have to ask Ray Hernandez yourself. You should have him on. Ray Hernandez's familiarity with his closeness with Dr. Mitchell to know that these documents were something that Eric Mitchell had. Can I say that
this letter, did he say anything about the Wilson document, though? Did he say that was the kind of thing that he knew that Commander Mitchell had?
Yes. He knew about it. He went to the history because he was so close to Eric Mitchell. He had interviewed Eric Mitchell on the record multiple times about that meeting with Greer and about Eric Mitchell's personal relationship to Willard Miller. Okay, he said he knows all about that. He interviewed and had many discussions with Dr. Mitchell regarding these things. But I'm going to stick to, I have documentation from about that original BDM meeting from one of the individuals who was present at it, who I became friends with. I don't mind saying his name now. It's late Jack Hout, Dr. Jack Hout.
Okay.
And after being his friend, upon his passing, I don't want to go into great deal here, but another friend of mine and I, doing research on this, were given files that he had at home, basically, to go through. Now, he had a big interest and involvement in psychokinesis and was a researcher and scientist in that, etc. He is an aerospace engineer, scientist, heading up projects for, I'll go ahead and say it, for Boeing Aerospace at the time, and etc. Now, my friend and I were mostly interested at that moment in the documents and the training manuals and the stuff he had on psychokinesis. And his family knew that and provided some stuff to us. But my friend, knowing enough about what Randy and I had already come across with the working group for many years, found certain documents that jumped out, naming specifically the meeting at BDM, some handwritten notes by Jack, an agenda of the meeting, minutes for the meeting, and overhead projection transparencies that had been made into copies that Jack had either copied the transparencies and or at the time of the meeting had been given, because the plastic things weren't in there, because it was back in 85. There was no such thing as PowerPoint, So he was given probably for the meeting a copy set of the transparencies. So, and these state about the group, its objectives and motives and everything, which now come into play because that meeting specifically, and Oak Shannon was in attendance, that is all specifically mentioned by Wilson in the interview with Dr. Davis. So it's specifically mentioned. And I have the documentation saying at least that meeting happened, okay? Multiple things from it, that had happened. That was, now, Randy and I do not believe that was necessarily the absolute kickoff of this group. They may have existed before that. I can get into this whole big story of what we have that goes before that, but it almost doesn't matter. But that they either regrouped or formulated and came up with plans and everything, like maybe it was just kind of a regathering or rebranding or, but kicking off a new projects in this meeting in 85. And so when this Wilson document, when the Wilson interview mentioned that, I realized I have documentation to at least support that happened. Now, I do know that the working group morphed over the time. People came in and out, and it went on for years. And it got Bigelow involved, and Bigelow was funding projects and things these guys were doing. And then it became at one point NIDS. So there was kind of a morphing into NIDS. Of course, anyone who studied the history of the current disclosure story knows that NIDS morphed into BAS. BAS morphed into OSAP and ATIP, and then begat, To the Stars Academy. So there's an overlap. It's not like one ends, one begins. I actually have a timeline in that presentation that I gave you guys the link for, the 40-year history presentation, where I have actually grafted this out with what seems to be about when projects and groups began, when they might have loosely ended or been quoted by members as ending versus them still doing stuff. And I have it grafted out. But even if you take the dates that these guys say it existed till here, there's overlap. It wasn't like NIDS ended and a year later, but BAS begins. They clearly overlapped by years even, clear overlap. So I have that grafted out. And then where do I get my data? Randy and I's very detailed research for 28 years. I mean, it's not a little data, it's a lot. So, and my interviewing individuals involved, I ended up becoming friends with some of the individuals involved, which goes to this very day. And at times they were guarded in answering questions, and at times they've been very candid. So again, this jumped out at me. At that point, I talked to some of the key researchers, and they said, you need to add your 2 cents on this and what you know, at least that I have the proof of that meeting. Because why is that important in relationship to the Wilson document? It's important because it speaks to the motive of why Eric is there. Clearly, and again, can I prove this? No.
Melinda, just to jump in really quick. Just to jump in really quick, what it seems like is that you're looking at to validate these documents and not looking at them, or the Wilson document at all critically.
No, that's not true. Don't even go there.
I just did.
I am saying.
So have you been critical of the document? What have you run down?
I came forward. Stop, Frank. No, you're reading stuff in, and anyone who knows me knows that.
I'm asking you a question.
Okay,
what did you do as far as?
Frank, you and I haven't talked about this. You don't know what my actual feelings and thoughts are on this. So please don't go there. I am saying that I asked others. I said I have a piece of information regarding that BDM meeting happening, and so other people said, including Daniel Sheehan, said, I think you should come forward with that. I think it's important.
Yep.
Because I can say that happened. Okay, now I can also say that speaks to the motivation of why Eric would have been there, because it was done by NIDS. They said, interview this guy. And Shannon is making reference, or Wilson is, to the working group to say, Shannon told me about the whole history. I know, so it's okay. It's okay, Eric. We can talk about that. I know about it already. Include me in. And then, obviously, Wilson is bringing that up because that speaks to the motivation of why Eric is there. And why would he have typed up his notes from this is because he knows he's going to share copies with NIDS. They sent him to the meeting. He's going to share them copies. And I've talked to 5-6 key researchers on this, and as soon as I bring this up, they say, absolutely, that totally speaks to the motivation. It makes perfect congruent sense. What would have put him there was NIDS sent him, to do this, okay? Because of Oak Shannon saying, hey, this guy wants to talk to you, because it was years later, the original meeting, and Wilson's digging into stuff obviously happened over the many years preceding that. So this interview didn't happen till 2002, but 2002 was when NIDS was very active. So it makes perfect sense. Okay, NIDS is active, and then BAS. So BAS and NIDS are active. There's a direct connection here. BAS is active at the same time. This is active at the point that Eric goes and does this, and it's no mystery. It's well established that Eric was a member of NIDS. So there you go. So they sent him. He interviews the guy. He makes notes because that's what he's going to give everyone.
Eric is also a member of AFIO, the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, and that is the purported reason for the the admiral for being there, Admiral Wilson.
Well, but Admiral Wilson is saying, Shannon says I should talk to you. And he's talking all about the working group. So it actually says in the document, I know about the working group. He's basically saying, I know why you're here. I mean, clearly, you read it.
Okay, but why is Wilson there? Have you been able to place
paragraphs.
Wilson in Vegas on the date? Have you been able to do that?
I don't know anything about that. But you said you just came off with something that placed him there.
No, it doesn't place him there. What I said was that Eric is a member of AFIO. And that is the reason that Wilson gives in the notes that he is in Vegas, in part to help out AFIO.
Now, here's another thing. I have additional evidence in that what I went on in great depth about, and I don't wish to cover as much time about it tonight, is last night in the last hour and a half of Dave Scott's radio program called, was it Spaced Out Radio?
Spaced Out Radio.
It's Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. He wanted me on the whole time. I had one of my UFO sighting tours with a large group of people. When I tried to change the date so I'd be able to do this with them, this group informed me that was their only night here in town and that they came just to do my tour. So, of course, I'm going to do that for them. So I let Dave know, okay, I can only go on at the end. I came on for the last about an hour and a half, And before that, my research associate and dear friend, Lorian Fenton, was on as guest. And they said, if you can get in, I said, if I can get in at 10:30, I will. The latest I'd come on as 11. And luckily, I was able to call them at 10:30 and get on. And we talked all about my past relationship, not past, my current, very current, because I just talked to him, 3 days ago, with Jim Semivan, and how that came to be and why that factors in. I'm sure most people following this have followed what Dolan is saying about this and his, I believe it's 4 videos now posted about it. And then those are also transcribed and written up on his website. But him and Tracy, and a couple Richard did by himself, and a couple of them were with his wife Tracy on camera. But in one of those, he references that he had a discussion with Hal Puthoff, of course, To the Stars member, and working with, his day-to-day business, his bread and butter business is with Eric Davis in his business.
Davis works for Hal at Earth Tech in Austin, Texas.
At Earth Tech, that's well established. And then we know Davis's involvement in the whole current story as far as not directly as a board member for To the Stars, but as an extended individual involved, combined with the Atom Project and the metamaterials and the science they're starting to do on possible crash retrieved pieces and the Atom Project, and as well as implants and other things that they're looking into. So that's kind of well established to people following the story. And so Hal had spoken to Richard and then I guess agreed to send him a paragraph through email that could be quoted and published, but I don't have it in front of me, but I agree with Richard's summation of it, that it was a brilliant non-denial.
What Puthoff said was we're not going to comment on anything that might have been classified, regardless.
But if you read it carefully, it is a well-crafted, again, I agree with what Richard says here. When you read it and you kind of read between the lines, it is a well-crafted, kind of brilliant non-denial. They're not denying. They're saying no comment. Yes, but it's the way they're saying it. Well, I ended up telling Richard
I don't necessarily go along with that. They're not commenting, so that means no comment.
Anyways,
it's speculation that it means anything more than that.
Hang on, Frank. Hang on. The reason I agree with Richard's assessment is because I had a 43-minute, 42 and a half, I think it's 42.36 or something, conversation on the phone with Jim Semivan that was a 43-minute version of exactly what Richard relayed to me, that his conversation with Hal, and of course the email from Hal. I had a 43-minute long version of that, which was a non-denial. Okay, I had a 43-minute long non-denial, but Rich and I talked about this, and Grant, etc. And it is appearing from the reaction of To the Stars, of Eric, of Hal, of everything, is that I jokingly said these guys, they circled the wagons and they've locked arms, and including Willard Miller, but they circled the wagons, locked arms, and have a unanimous front for their position of this. And I actually asked Jim Semivan, I said, what's To the Stars' position? He says, we don't have a position. Okay, that's a quote.
Well,
but,
Mellon went further.
Mellon
Went further with Billy Cox when he said he thought that the scenario of one contractor, one aerospace contractor controlling such a thing was implausible to him. It was in the Billy Cox article about all this. Chris Mellon.
Who said that to?
Chris Mellon said that to Billy Cox.
Yeah, well, okay. But basically, these guys, none of them are acting independent of each other in the response to this. Jim told me, we had a meeting, we talked about it. And I said, you don't have a position. See, you get what I'm saying here? He's saying, we don't have a position. Oh, you had a meeting and you talked about this. You obviously are concerned, And I will go on to say from my conversation with Jim, the tone of his voice, if there's reading between the lines of what Hal wrote, they're certainly listening between the lines or between the phrases that Jim said, and that they are concerned. They're obviously very concerned.
Sometimes you have to go, when you do research, you need to go a little bit beyond reading between the lines. You have to actually do some research. We've done that here.
I'm saying, I did. I called and had a 43-minute conversation with Jim Semivan. Okay, that's my research. I called him and said, I need your take on this. What are you saying? And then I had to listen very carefully and ask really thoughtful questions. And I tried every which way to ask a question to give him an out, to give him a chance to deny. He never did. So these guys are concerned, and he gave me some very interesting things to say about it. And we talked for 43 minutes about it. So I'm telling you, from that, what I truly felt and perceived is that these guys have circled the wagons, or I jokingly say circled the fighter jets, locked arms. That's an inside joke. Circle the fighter jets, lock arms, and they're having unanimous front in what they say and don't say. Now, they could have just denied this easily, but they haven't. And I think that's very telling. None of these guys have denied it. Okay. And I think it's because they know that that interview happened, Now, anyway, so do you
know of anybody looking at known samples of Eric Davis's writing and comparing them to the notes? Do you know if anyone's taken that step to do that?
I don't know that anyone has access to Eric Davis.
Do you know if anyone has made an effort to see if Admiral Wilson was in Vegas on a particular date?
So you see, I don't know anything about that, Frank, and yes, those are good points. I don't know of anyone that's got documents typed up by Eric that they could compare, okay, other than official documents stated on Hal and Eric's businesses website, EarthTech, and the Atom Project stuff. But those are, things done up on a computer. There's, is there a style of writing? We don't know if Hal wrote it or Eric wrote it. Who knows? So it's hard to say. I don't know of anyone that has that. If they do, great. If they do, and they have any documentation or ever received documents or letter or an agreement or contract or anything from Eric, please come forward so we can compare them. Sure.
Yeah, there's a known example of this. There's a known example of this that came up in the news within the last year or so regarding an op-ed piece that was supposedly written by a White House insider that was saying, the steady state is in control, don't worry about Trump, blah, blah, blah. And the word lodestar was used in it. And people immediately pointed to Vice President Mike Pence because he frequently uses that. So, there are things that, again, it doesn't prove anything one way or the
again,
other.
I don't know who's got documents to compare, so I want to stay out of that, Frank. I'm not going there. I don't know who has documents to compare. I don't know if anyone's done it. I don't think they have. I haven't heard anyone say they have other documents from Eric. If they do, please come forward, because that should be compared. Okay,
they should do it. They should do it before running around saying it's the leak of the century.
Is evidence that
gun.
The working group of which Oak Shannon was a part of is referenced in the letter or in the interview.
Understood. It's well put together. It's a well put together letter.
And those people, there's a big crossover between that group and NIDS. I have 28 years of research showing that.
Why do you think that Eric Davis would use everybody else's full name but abbreviate John Alexander, who is very who the information is very dismissive of? Why do you think that would be? Why wouldn't you just type out?
Because it was dismissive for that reason. I don't know. You have to ask him. I don't know. When I read it, it made sense to me because it was such a dismissive comment. Okay.
Well, it immediately jumped out to me. I asked Michael, and he seems to feel he has pinned down it was meant to be John Alexander. So there's that. He said that on the show. So repeating that is no big deal.
Yeah.
And it was the first name that came to my mind too.
I feel like we need to move on. Some things they're just making so much consistent logic. If some things are so blatantly consistently logical, let's go to what is in the document, okay? And maybe why it was released.
I think whoever wrote that document really knows their stuff.
May be something very significant.
I agree with that. I think there's something very very interesting about the document. It was clearly written by an insider. I don't think there's any question about that. Somebody who knows a lot. So I'm all for that.
And it makes perfect
but I'm
sense
still
that
awfully...
these are all NIDS documents that someone has come out with because they had access to them. And there are a number of people who had access to Edgar Mitchell's files. And since he was at those meetings and copied on everything, that's not a far reach, particularly since the third letter is clearly written to him.
Oh, yeah. I don't question the genuineness of the third letter.
Let me talk for a second here. Everybody's talked for a long time. I've been listening. I still have to ask Melinda my question that I did not get a chance to ask her. Okay, my question is, since we know there is no evidence to provide that the smoking gun doc and the alien autopsy emails came from the estate or the files of Edgar Mitchell yet, I'm not saying that's permanent, but
I'm good with that. I'm good with that. Okay.
Then how do we know that all this supposed or alleged sensitive information or alleged top secret information or alleged classified information was not manipulated and put together by somebody that had direct access to the Edgar Mitchell estate / files? How do we know that
Chant? We don't know that. And you just made a very good point.
Let me finish, Melinda. What I would like to know along that thought process is how do we, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat what I just said so I can finish the thought process, and going along that thought of how do we know that somebody did not manipulate or put together a kaleidoscope of information from the Edgar Mitchell estate or files of his to create a dense information package to then drop for everybody to look at. I found the timing interesting. People can say they've seen some of these documents for years. Okay, then why are they talking about them all in totality now? And I mean the 2 docs, not the 3 that just came out. I'm not talking about the 3rd. I'm talking about the alien autopsy doc and the smoking gun doc. Now, a lot of people have been talking in the UFO community about how there's so much sensitive information in these docs. One, how do we know it's really sensitive information? That's fine. If we can verify that, I'm good with that. Let's even say that there is real classified information in there. I'm fine with that too. My question is still, how do we know that there's not some kind of disinfo program going by an intelligence agent or somebody who is smart enough to act like one and put all this stuff together so that we will have circular conversations on it for infinity?
Well, it goes to what might be the motives, and we're left to speculate. But granted, the motives I thought of were in relationship to why why, if these were, if, I'm saying if, don't anybody jump on me, if these were in the possession of Dr. Mitchell and it was someone associated with them who brought this information forward, that there's a line of reasoning to motive there. Now, you're right. Could it be, because I even speculated, and I said this in a conversation with Richard Dolan. I said, basically, you'll be happy to hear this. I had this exact same kind of conversation with Richard Dolan where I said, what if this is a brilliant, plausible deniability way to release the docs, but make it point to Edgar Mitchell because it's easy to blame the dead guy, not to belittle the wonderful life of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, but being that he's passed away, you can't blame the dead guy. So you go back to, okay, if these were in his possession, it was someone that knew him, and the timing is the motive. It is the timing. It is in relationship to what is going on that To the Stars is generating with what's going on politically with the Navy, the Air Force, the president being questioned by Stephanopoulos. Now, as of today, the senators saying they were briefed. I mean, this is deliberate, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that this is all very deliberate, okay? And pushing it in closed-door meetings, in D.C. was To the Stars. So they're directly involved. And whether someone is using them as a front or whether this is something that they are really generating, we could debate till the end of the planet, and I don't wish to because I don't know. But I put that out as a possibility to Richard. What if, and he said at this point, we do, Richard was very fair about it, and we were in total agreement. At this point, and you probably, it sounds like, you guys would be too, we don't know, like you were just bringing up. We don't know that that's not a possibility. I'm not here to answer all those questions. All I can say is I have two pieces of evidence that are puzzle pieces that can help us with this. One is I do know the history of that group. I do understand why some people might be at odds with some of their choices. I do know the history leading up, long before and leading up to the formation of NIDS, and from NIDS to BAS to OSAP to ATIP to the Stars. So there is an interconnectionness here, and I have expressed, although Richard disagreed with me, but Grant did agree with me that this is a shot across the bow from someone. This is a problem for these guys. Grant is saying this in every interview he's done in the last 3 days. This is a problem for these guys. They are saying, oh, it's not a problem, but it's a 43-minute explanation of how this isn't a problem for us. And it's a official written statement by Hal. The idea of those protests too much comes to mind. Okay.
Okay.
So,
go ahead.
Okay. So I agree with you that these other things, as I just said, I stated them just yesterday to Richard. We have to consider these other possibilities. Sure. But all I know is, and the only reason I was so busy right now with work, I'm busy all day with clients. I'm busy with big tour groups every night. I just came from speaking at, not at Contact, but another conference that was kind of a small private seminar thing. I came back to, just landing in the midst of being busy. I was planning 3 trips coming up. One of them's been canceled, but 2 others to conferences where I'm going to have exhibit tables, vendor table. I'm not speaking either, but I have a vendor table, and so I'm in the midst of my just having too much on my plate. I'm not able to get through it. All this happened. And I'm like, I don't want to be a part of it.
Join the club.
And I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. And yeah, join the club. You got it. And then Richard and Grant and I have said this in conversations, like, this couldn't be worse timing for all of us. I mean, it's just like, but I had the evidence in the history of the group and Eric's involvement and, or possible involvement and certainly Oak and JA's involvement, and so, and you go, okay. And I have this additional thing, and I'm like, I can at least say those 3 paragraphs that talk about that are talking about something accurate. So I thought, I have documentation to support that. I should come forward with that. And I had a number of researchers who I've already mentioned who supported me in doing so. And then additionally, and it wasn't right away, I waited a couple days because I avoided doing it like the plague. I just spoke to, and I really try not to be a thorn in his side, because I don't want to wear out the welcome mat at all for talking to Jim Semivan. And I just talked to him a week before about something else, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to ask him. I just talked to him. I don't want to bug him, because he'll start avoiding my calls, or
right,
is what I'm thinking. So
sure.
as days went by, I went, especially when I was thinking I should call him. I was thinking. I was telling Richard I might call him. And then all of a sudden, Rich puts out there, I talked to Hal, or he tells me on the phone. He hadn't put it out. He made the video that night. But that day, Rich is telling me, I talked to Hal, he sent me an email, and I went, oh my God. And I said, at that point, I told Richard Dolan, in other words, that I had called Jim and we had played phone tag, because I'd actually called him the day before. He called me back in the morning, but it was really early, and I didn't take the call. And so I'm telling Richard, okay, I called him. I was even wondering if I should have, and then all of a sudden you're saying you talked to Hal. This is the response from Hal. And he said, well, you got to call him. You got to call him back. Richard's like, call him back, find out what he said. And I did. And like I said, we had a 43-minute conversation. And I ended up getting back to Richard and saying, he's saying the same thing as Hal, But he did say a few extra minor things that I thought were, in addition, that were interesting. If I can find them on my notes here. Oh my goodness. I'm looking for them right here. Here's a couple things that I thought, everything he was saying was along the lines of explaining no comment and explaining why they couldn't comment, and going quite in depth about they all have their security oaths till death. He said, we have our security oaths till we die, and those are very serious, and we all take them very seriously. But he said the following, he said, and this is, I'm going to quote him, quote, even if one sentence on a document is classified or dealing with something that is, we cannot comment on the entire document.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that segues into what I was going to ask you.
The reading, that kind of blows the reading between the lines, and that's a non-denial denial. It seems to blow that a little out of the water.
Frank,
I disagree. I disagree for the opposite reason.
Melinda, let me ask you a question regarding that. You just said something that's really interesting, and that is, and I'm just going to go ahead and sort of paraphrase it, and that is, if anything in the document, even one sentence refers to something classified, we cannot comment in any way on the whole entire document. If there's one sentence there, we can't comment on it. That idea, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and go to another area regarding that idea. And that is something that Dr. Mitchell has been attributed to having said, and that is the UFO program that the Admiral sought would be in this category. Thus, by law, he would be required to deny the existence of such a program. For a core secret SAP, even a no comment would be a breach of security. Same idea, right? Well, my question is this. Then if all these people are saying that they have no comment, or even if they have made a comment about these documents, that would mean, in essence, that they just breached security. So why then should I believe them?
That's true. That's true. That's a very good point.
Why aren't people looking at that logic? I don't understand it, but I'd like to bring it up because it's important.
No, I'm just
Melinda.
saying I agree with you.
We have all these famous talk show hosts that are going over this as though they are the authorities on this document, which is fine. If they've been researching it extensively, I'm totally fine with that. However, some are using this idea that no comment would be a breach of security. Well, then you can't cherry pick your research. You either are with that or you're not. And that is folks allegedly involved in these two docs. Some are saying that they've either been involved or they sort of have been involved. Maybe they're flirting with the idea of it, or they're saying no comment. And so by virtue of them speaking at all, again, that means that they just broached security. They just basically broke their oath, if they even had one, regarding possible classified material. Why are people not considering that?
Okay, well, I want to move on, and you may be right. And I think that's a nice, valid point to bring up. And that's an interesting, thing to think about. I mean, believe me, I've tried to look at this from every angle possible. I don't have a dog in the race. I have a document about that other meeting. I said I can at least come forward with information that says that meeting, as mentioned by Oak Shannon, and that involvement happened, okay? And in additional to anything Alexander said, I am an independent of that piece of information. So I thought that was important. And then I called Jim and had a 43-minute conversation, so I think it's important to offer that up. There was only one part of the conversation I had with Jim where I said, this next part's kind of off the record. It had nothing to do with the documents or the security clearances or any of this conversation. It was about future projects for To the Stars, completely unrelated. It was kind of one of their entertainment projects. And he said, don't share this part. And I agreed not to, because he may be doing that to test that I would not share that. So I'm not going to share about that future plan. I don't think it was any big deal that he shared with me, but just the fact that he did.
Yeah, if somebody says off the record, you honor that.
Yeah. So I honor that. And because if I didn't honor that, and if I said anything that I think he had a huge problem with, I would lose my, contact of being able to talk to him. Now, I want everyone to know I do so very guardedly. He talks to me very guarded, and I talk to him very guarded. He's willing to talk to me, so I ain't going to do anything to burn that bridge, okay? I have an open communication, and I can quote Mr. Semivan saying this, that I am the only person in ufology he's talking to. In fact, he joked about it, except for John Alexander and Hal Puthoff, who he talks to all the time. But he said, well, I don't consider them in ufology. And I said, I think pretty much ufology would not consider would not really consider Hal or John Alexander in ufology, as well as they wouldn't. But because he did make a joke about that. He goes, well, I guess they're not really ufology. And I go, no. But he said otherwise, out of the research community. Now, granted, members of the board talk to different people, other members involved in To the Stars have, like Hal talking to Dolan, and, of course, everyone but Jim talking to George Knapp. Okay, but as far as Jim Semivan, who it used to say on their website was director of operations, and somewhere along the way, because, it was a number of months ago that I looked at it after not having looked at it in many, many months, it no longer said director of operations. It said vice president of To the Stars and co-founder. Of course, president being Tom DeLonge and founder being Tom DeLonge. So it says co-founder and vice president. So going back to, and he has a long, extensive, very high-level CIA background. A number of people have looked into that. So now, he went on to say, and I think this was a little bit of the tip of the hat. I thought if there was any point in 43 minutes where I felt he, I would say he slipped or anything, was him saying that they're friends with many of the individuals mentioned, meaning in the Wilson document. And he said they don't want to create problems, difficulties, or that could be for those people mentioned. He said it could be very embarrassing for some of them. It could cause them grief. These are kind of quotes. He was saying they could be embarrassing. I'm kind of paraphrasing him here, but embarrassing for them, cause them grief, could cause legalities, and could be detrimental towards their jobs or positions. But he said, and we're friends with them, so we don't want to be detrimental to their jobs, their positions, cause legalities, cause them grief, or cause them embarrassment.
Sure.
But he said we do know, and he didn't just.
But there could be all sorts of reasons for that kind of embarrassment.
Yeah, we had already discussed, him and I on the phone, its mention of, by the way, He knows it's John Alexander. We've talked about that on the phone. So there you go. How do you know that's not J.A.? Well, Jim Sammy Van and I talked about it. It was clear to him it was John Alexander. So that's not a mystery. That's not worth debating.
It's clear to everybody.
So he said it was
obvious.
John. So yeah, well, he said it was John. So okay, so but he said other than John and Oak and Eric and and Wilson, and Willard, other than that, he meant other individuals in there that they are associated with or friends with, and they don't want to cause them grief or embarrassment. To admit that he knew other people involved, well, to me, I think that was maybe a little bit of a slip. I mean, he's being very honest and trying to be very frank and friendly with me, and he may have, in doing so, that was a tip of the hat. So there you go. That was my takeaway. I can tell by the fact it was a 43-minute conversation, the nature of how he said it, that these guys are aware. He clearly said it. He had read it. I asked him that right from the beginning. They've seen everything. They've discussed it. And obviously it's of concern to them, which might speak to whoever put it out there in their motivations was to be of concern to these individuals. Okay?
To cause them problems. It was done deliberately to cause them problems, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'm going to throw out, now this is just Melinda. This is just me, and I admit this. So you guys, this is just from all the stuff I know
Speculate
so far.
Away. Do it.
Okay. From all the stuff that I know so far, from the conversations that I've had with everybody I've already mentioned in this interview, is that, what did I just do with that? I had it in front of me until I moved stuff around. Sorry. Is I'm speculating here. The reasons, because Sammy Van did say, it doesn't cause any problems for us. We're not concerned. We only had one meeting about it, Okay, that's, I'm quoting him. Okay. But if they're concerned and have locked arms in a unanimous voice in response and are getting marching orders on how to respond from anyone in the UFO community, research community, and or the media, how to respond to this, they have a game plan is apparent, okay? I don't think that's a far reach to suggest these guys have a game plan. And I think that the reason someone may have released this, now a lot of what I'm about to say is speculation based upon if, and I'm saying if, you guys, these were the files of Dr. Edgar Mitchell because he was copied on everything during its time with NIDS, and that someone has now released that after his death, whether at his request or not, but someone has released that stuff. So let's go with that as a working premise, okay? Based upon that premise, I was, what could be the reasons for release? And some of these were things that I discussed because I do not know Dr. Mitchell. Many research in the field and stuff have met him, but someone that I know quite well, it was very, very close to him, and that is Ray Hernandez of the organization Free. Yeah, so Ray. So after conversations with him, him and I speculated, and then I went on, and then I talked to Grant. And so this, again, I'll own this. This is Melinda speculation. That the reasons for the release, and these aren't any particular order. So one was that I said, I don't know if the person who did this is trying to just push the subject way forward due to being impatient with the current disclosure trajectory. If some of these things, and we haven't even really, we all talk about the Wilson document. To Randy and I and our research, the letter from Bigelow to Dr. Mitchell is extremely important because one thing Randy and I have come up with our research of these individuals and their involvement in the UFO subject is a huge, high degree of interest in abductions and abduction research and abduction accounts and in the science from abductions and in the implants, et cetera. And they're doing that now, as everyone knows, with the Dr. Davis and the Kit Green and the Jacques Vallée, involvement and the work they've done with abductees. This is not a secret to this day, and yet there's a history going back in the 40-year history, going back to the original meeting And I gave you guys the agenda and the first 2 pages of part of the transparencies. Now, the highlighting on there is something I did in a rush because I was taking photos of those documents to include before last August in my PowerPoint presentation for speaking for Lorianne, first in the March before that for UFOCon, and then the following August for her MUFON Sonoma, Mendocino, or MUFON Marin County, Sonoma. So, and so I wanted to include those. It was kind of a last minute idea. I highlighted them so when I took pictures of them, I could actually show the documents and highlight the parts that I thought were significant to the presentation I was giving. But they had 3 stated goals in their meeting in 1985. One was about the technology. 2 was psi, paranormal abilities. 3 was abduction. Now, if you go back to the group behind all of this, there's this common thread. This common thread group in their meeting stating these are our plans over the next number of years are these interests in UFO technology, psi functioning, psi component, the psi part of the technology, as well as abductions and abductions themselves. Well, of course, this has always dovetailed right in with my MILABS research. And some of these same names and individuals have come up repeatedly with my MILAB cases, that they've had strong interest in these MILAB cases, strong interest in the abductees, and the same abductees that these same individuals have shown interest in, some of those same abductees also are my MILAB cases in addition. So all along, these names kept coming up. No, I'm not saying, and I have never been able to find an absolute, well, actually, I take that back. I have found very little absolute links, but there are some directly to MILAB-related scenarios. So I can't say there's none. There are, including one individual who is part of the original group. One of my cases worked for him. During that time, he owed her some back pay. She went to take him to court. He threatened her by saying, and he went into great detail about one of her actual MILAB military abduction scenarios, as if he either was present during it and or watched a video taken of her event. In other words, like the military perpetrators in her event filmed the whole thing, and he saw a video of it, or he was actually present when it happened because he knew details about an experience that was a MILAB abduction, and used that to threaten her to say, not only will you not take me to court over this money, but you're going to drop this because I know all this, and used it as a way to threaten her. And she called me and said, Melinda, he knew every detail of that account. So that is one of the individuals involved. Another individual involved, I've had at least 3 people place that individual there during their interrogations. Interrogated, underground base, that gentleman there, and I've had 3 separate people place him there. So, okay, so I'm not going to name names because I'm not going to set myself up for, major flack. But these are the same people. So it's always dovetailed directly in that way, anyways, with my MILAB research, which has kept me going to this day, where you go, well, why is Jim Van talking to me? Well, you guys, I bet you can guess. Okay, I just told you why. Okay, so.
But he's also told you that my labs aren't happening too.
No, he didn't tell me that. He did not tell me that. He has never told me that. I don't know where you're getting that from. He never told me that. In fact, he told me something very opposite of that. Okay. We've had multiple discussions, and it was very much the opposite of that. So I want to go back into these reasons for the release of the documents, because I think this is important. So I said, so whoever released this may be trying to push the subject way forward due to being very impatient with the current disclosure trajectory. These guys are taking too long, too slow. They're not admitting everything they know. And so let's push this forward. That's reason 1. Number 2, whoever did this doesn't like where it's going, specifically with the threat perspective. They may not like the threat perspective, and so they're going to kind of expose that these guys know better, or that they are generating that for a reason. Okay, meaning the guys doing disclosure, that they're generating that threat perspective for a reason. Okay, number 3, the person doing this may wish to expose that these folks actually know a lot more than they're saying. Well, clearly these documents suggest these folks know a lot more than they've said publicly or published or anything. So someone could be trying to expose that. 4, obviously, 4, 2, they may be trying to redirect the disclosure conversation more towards the truth, or at least a bigger, more truthful story. In other words, the bigger story. So they're trying to direct it towards the truth and the bigger story. And 5, I said, to point out or to actually expose the agenda of the people involved with the current disclosure story. So I just threw those out there. Those are my theories as to the motivation by someone to do this. And I admit, they're just mine, but they're based upon logic. They're based upon my talking to other researchers. They're based upon a bunch of, interlinking things that I think, why would someone come forward with these? Well, and the timing, and it's all based on the timing, because everything I just said reflects that timing issue of why it's happening right now. They're either trying to push it forward faster or throw a wrench in the works or expose it or something. Okay, so I just threw that out there, and I just wanted to offer that up.
Melinda, doesn't the smoking gun document indicate that abductions aren't real?
No. Okay.
Frank?
I don't think it does.
Yeah, it does say that. Well, per Jock Gansler, it does say that.
But
yeah,
I don't think it says that. Okay, I think that someone is not. I'd have to go back. Refer to. I don't have it right in front of me. Okay. So refer to me where on the document it says that in the context of which it says.
Yeah, hang on. Let me find that.
I think it's on page 4. I think it's on
later
page
in the
14.
document. That much I do remember. I will find it. Hang on.
It's on page.
But somebody, Eric is quoting.
I believe that is purportedly the admiral saying that.
Okay.
The admiral was told that.
Eric is quoting. Wilson is saying that. Wilson is saying he was told that by someone else. It doesn't even say that Wilson believes that. Okay, he's quoting somebody else. So Eric's quoting Wilson, quoting somebody else. You don't know what actually someone believes. And then I think the third document tosses that on its head, because the third document, and these came out together to Grant, and everyone should keep that in mind. Someone handed to him to.
Hello.
I'm right here. Okay, let's go give her a call back if she did drop off. Maybe her mic went mute, because I see her right there.
Yeah, she's still on the line.
Yeah, she is. She might be having an audio issue right there. Okay. But just one sec. I'm looking at the document right now regarding the abduction not being real scenario. Okay. While we look for that, just wanted to kind of mention something interesting. This has been a really great discussion with Melinda. I'm hoping that we can get her back on.
Oh, yeah. Her work on this working group and all that is absolutely top notch. It's just we've obviously got some problems with the Wilson doc. We've got a problem with it. So I think we've ginned up some more information tonight that presents a problem with it, and that our feeling is that too many UFO researchers have just sort of accepted it and not looked at it critically. This is let's see.
I'm adding her right now, by the way.
What's that?
I'm adding her right now, by the way, so you know. I'm trying to get her right now, so she
Hello?
might talk.
There she is. Okay.
Okay, Melinda, I'm
good.
sorry. We somehow dropped you. How did that? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm trying to remember where I was. Anyway, so so I was saying that they're so far what we know is it appears to come from one source. Okay, no, we don't know if there's a group of people behind that, but at this point, okay, at least all the documents that.
Well, Melinda, there is one person that we do know had all these docs collected in one package at one point in time, and that is Jack Rigney. Well, Jack Rigney.
Oh, Jack, yeah. James. James Rigney gave them to Grant. Yes. So James gave the whole set to Grant. James says, "This is everything I have." Grant says, "This is everything I have." James says, "I don't know if the source who gave them to me is going to give out more stuff or not." Okay. So, and so we don't know if there's more coming from that source. But James says, "I've given everything I had." Okay.
Right. And this is a person in the aerospace industry.
My point being, the third thing that Grant just came out with. That, he has a few others, but he's waiting till, he thinks it's important, whatever. He's kind of laying low. I get it. We just talked about, there's a lot of reasons. That's, it's just Grant. Okay. But he came forward with this other one because he thought, being that it was a letter from Bigelow to Dr. Mitchell, that it certainly showed, or was circumstantial evidence, okay, to suggest that these were from Mitchell's file. Okay. But in addition to that, what's important to Randy Kopang and I is something we've said, because it goes back to that original meeting, and all has been a big part of their focus all along, was an intense focus on abduction research as one of their primary things. Now, you're not hearing To the Stars or anybody talk about that yet, right?
They're not even talking about experiencers in general.
Yeah, but there is a history going back with this group of, I gave a whole 2-hour-long lecture, if anybody goes to the link I gave you guys and watches it, all about the history, and it's a significant part of it is their constant interest in abductions and involved with abductees. These guys are going and spending the night at abductees' house to investigate their cases, multiple people. And this isn't a little bit, this is a lot, and funding, Bigelow's funding abduction research organizations. He funded, by the way, the third document, the letter, Bigelow's telling him, hey, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about the fact that we sent abduction implants, removed implants, we sent them to Los Alamos. They've got results for us. We're going to discuss those results from Los Alamos labs of these implants. And you know what? Whose implants those were? Those were all from Dr. Roger Lear, because they were funding the surgeries of Dr. Lear. That's well established. They were funding those surgeries. It doesn't mention Lear in the letter, but anyone who knows the history knows, okay, these are Lear's implants. Isn't that interesting, all of you guys who had, surgeries with Lear, that your implants went to Los Alamos? Ta-da! Guess what? It says it right there.
Okay.
And it shows the importance of abduction research. In that letter, it states clearly, repeatedly, it's almost in every paragraph, their interest in abduction research. It's clearly stated. And to Randy and I, we already knew that. We knew it from multiple sources. Boom, here's a whole brand new document backing up what we've been saying about that.
Okay, Melinda, I'm going to go ahead and break in here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean page 14. Yeah. I meant page 15. It says, TW, UFOs are real, so-called alien abductions not real. Gansler said this. That's the quote that comes from the alleged smoking gun document.
Yeah, but the source who's getting it from this are the source that also aren't going to tell him everything. So why would they tell him the truth about that? They're not telling him everything. He's saying, they're not giving me everything. I went to that meeting. They're not giving me everything. I did not get everything. And when they told me this, well, take it for what it's worth. It probably isn't true. Wilson saying I was told it doesn't mean it's true. It just means he says, I was told this. I don't think we need to imply anything about what Wilson believed or not believed there. He's just saying, they told me this.
Okay, I'd like to let everybody know who Roger Lear was. I know who he was. I used to read a lot about him back in the day. He goes way back, and I think people need to understand who he was. He was an American I can never say this right, by the way. Podiatric. Surgeon, yeah. And ufologist, best known as investigator of alleged alien implants. Lear wrote books such as The Alien and the Scalpel and appeared on various radio and television shows, including Coast to Coast AM, claiming he had discovered proof of non-terrestrial experimentation on man. My God, it's so funny reading from Wikipedia sometimes, isn't it?
I know, yeah.
But I didn't mean to pull up Wikipedia, but I just wanted to find something to read about him quickly so folks can go ahead and look him up. I just want to spell his last name so folks can actually find him, and that is Leir, Roger Lear, and he was heavily involved in ufology. But anyway, go ahead, Melinda, make your point. Sorry.
Well, he did 17 surgical removals of alien implants. The last surgery, patient 17, a documentary was made by, a very good documentary, was made by Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy Corbell wrote an amazing produced and directed an amazing documentary about that last surgery and the work of Dr. Roger Lear. So for people to know more, I also recommend that they go and watch Patient 17.
Okay, so Melinda wanted to make a point. So let me just go ahead and bring this up regarding TW. And this is, okay, so everybody understands, I'm reading this from the Smoking Gun document. And it says, TW, UFOs are real, so-called alien abductions not real. Gansler said this. I'm pulling that from the doc, from the Smoking Gun memo, as it's called. I wanted to
Thomas
know...
Wilson. Admiral Wilson is quoting Gansler as having it told him that. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. What I wanted to say is, if we are to not believe that one quote out of the Smoking Gun doc, but believe part and parcel other parts.
No, I'm not saying don't believe it. Wilson said it. I don't doubt for a minute that Wilson said, Gansler told me this. It doesn't mean Gansler was telling him. Maybe Gansler doesn't know about abductions. There could be a million reasons why he would say, oh, abductions aren't. There could be a million reasons why he would say that to Wilson. So you can't read in. Who knows what Gansler meant? Maybe he did. Maybe he wanted to not have Wilson look into abductions. Maybe think, oh, there's nothing to that. Like, don't bother looking. Maybe that was his intention.
Just so you know, I understand what you mean when you say you can't read in. I get that from your perspective, but I always do. I will always read into documents. It's just something I do.
Well, who knows what? We don't know why Gansler said it. Well, if we're believing that this is a real interview and Eric is actually writing down what Wilson said, Wilson is saying Gansler said there are none. Okay, maybe Gansler believes that. You guys, there's abductions. Let's not even, I don't even want to go there. I'm an abductee. I've had 9 NILAB events. Let's not go there, okay? That's pushing the button with me, obviously. But, and the third thing, which came out with these, again, if we think of these, I don't want to keep saying Wilson doc, but I want to call these, I'm wanting to call them the Mitchell documents. All right, you're right. If there's no absolute that they came from Mitchell, I guess we can't. But they came together. So you can say these documents that came out together, okay? From one single source, it appears, So if, given that as highly likely, because that's the story we all are getting so far, that the third thing clearly shows, and we know there's a long history. There's no question that NIDS had an interest in abductions. I mean, NIDS itself, it funded what was, became the Carpenter debacle, and it funded the abduction transcription project of MUFON and, everything. So this is well established that they had a huge interest. They were working with abductees and that they are to this day. At least, when I met with Semivan a year and a half ago, the first time for lunch, where he told me, and I didn't ask him this, he offered this up. The To the Stars Academy, as we know it, the 10, 12 people on their website, that is the public face of a bigger group that he said was more like 50 people. In the recent conversation I just had with him, I brought that up again for clarity. I specifically said, you once said to me, is this still the case? He said, yes. Okay, it's still the case. It's a much bigger group. That's just a public face. Realize it's a much bigger group of people running the show on this thing. And so, so he said that, and part of that bigger group contains the group of people doing research with abductees and abduction organizations. It's in my presentation. I went and called, because I'd heard a story regarding these guys trying to fund free. And they went to the board, and there was I believe a conference call, and where DeLong actually offered the board of directors for free money for all their research and stuff. Free, Ray tells me, they knew at the time that because of the Carpenter debacle and the MUFON debacle and everything else, they said, you know what? No. And they also said we're CO3, what, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And the Carpenter documents are the...
But they're a nonprofit, and they said we can't accept corporate money, so no, we don't want your money. And that was their out. But they said we knew the history. These guys had a history that wasn't good towards abductees, and therefore, no, thank you, we don't want to be involved. And guess what? Good. Free is very concerned, of course, with the direction towards a kind of a bent towards ETs being a threat. Obviously, they're very concerned with that. So, I just wanted to throw that out there. But so that this group has an interest in that, whether one guy told Wilson something he thinks or feels, or he said he was told, or maybe he told Wilson to throw Wilson off. I think it's such a minor point. It does not discredit the document. Come on. It's one guy's opinion that he's telling Wilson. Wilson may be quoting him correctly. It doesn't mean the guy. We don't know why the guy.
Well,
told
the
that
same
to
could be
Wilson.
said about the entire doc then, if he could be
but that's what I'm
misquoting
saying.
somebody.
Wilson is quoting the guy accurately. Okay, so if this is a true interview and Wilson's quoting the guy accurately, the guy told him that. The guy told him that. So what? The guy told him that. It doesn't mean there's no abductions. It doesn't mean the whole thing's fake.
I didn't say
Come
that
on,
either.
you guys.
I'm not saying that either. You're putting words in my mouth. I would like to say one
I'm
thing,
sorry,
though.
I'm sorry.
And that
you guys,
is...
I'm just getting worked out up here because I
hold on.
think we need to move on to the content.
Melinda, let me just say one thing, okay? Because for the majority of the interview, I would say percentage-wise, you've been able to speak about 90% of it. I would like to say just something, okay? And that is, it's not really something that's that epic, but I would like to say that I do have a problem with that part of the document with regards to it saying alien abductions are not real. And I'm not the only one on this, because there's other people I know who feel the same way. And now that's not to say these docs are not real. I'm not saying it in that respect. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying my perspective, my own personal opinion is alien abductions are real. That was just the only point I wanted to make aside from the other point, and that is that document does state that there.
Okay. Well, obviously, Wilson's quoting a guy. We don't know why the guy told Wilson that. If this is all an accurate and real document, then, if it is, we go, based on that premise, then you go, okay, Wilson's quoting this guy. Who knows why that guy said that to Wilson? Wilson's quoting him. He's probably quoting him accurately. It doesn't mean it's an accurate statement. He's just quoting the guy telling him that. So if we're to go straight forward with, well, are the quotes accurate? I don't know. All I know is those 3 paragraphs that are quotes between Oak Shannon and Wilson, and Wilson saying, Oak told me this, and Eric, I know all about it. I have evidence in support of all that I've come forward with now. And I also have an additional story in that I went to Jim Semivan and got a very similar response to Dolan. And Jim said those additional things that I thought were very telling. He did admit to me they know people mentioned in it, and that, they don't want to create grief for those people. So
okay, and I have a question for you then. What are you going to do if one of the folks allegedly involved in the smoking gun doc, and I'm not talking about Miller either, states that he is not involved with this doc, and not only is he not, that he believes this entire doc, being the smoking gun doc, is a fake? What is everybody going to do then? That's my question. You know what I think the answer is going to be? I think it's going to be the same thing. And that is that by even saying something, that would be considered part of their...
Well, that's their answer. That is their answer.
Hold on, Melinda. Let me finish. That by saying that they're not a part of that they're not allowed to say it because of some NDA or something they signed.
That's right.
Then we go back into our circular discussion that an innocent person is not allowed to refute these documents because everybody is saying, oh, no, they signed something to say they can't say something. So then how can an innocent person defend themselves?
Well, look, I don't want to even go there. I don't know.
Why not?
But I'm saying, let me say, Chant, hang on. These guys have been approached. Guys mentioned in the document. Guys in the document have.
About that. Melinda, why?
Well, yeah, I mean, we approached one of the guys in the documents.
People in the document have been approached and asked. That's why I said they circled the wagons. They've locked arms. They're all saying no comment.
Well, they're not all saying no comment because
brief little things that aren't saying it's real. They've obviously are speaking with a unanimous voice. They've spoken to each other. There's an agreement. They're all coming across the same way. They're all saying similar things.
Where is your evidence that every single person in the smoking gun dock?
I'm not saying everyone did.
Then that's
we spoke to Commander Miller. He's gone on the record with us.
Some of them have been approached. Some of them have been approached, and this is what they're saying.
Then my point remains the same, and that is, how can an innocent person defend themselves from being accused of having been involved in this dock, allegedly?
You know what they do? Because they have security oaths, they say what they're saying, which is no
well, see,
comment.
that's what I'm saying. You're proving my point.
That was explained to me.
That there's no way that...
That's why I already brought that up, Chad. I already said that Semi-Van told me if one sentence in the document is correct, they can't comment on the whole thing. So in other words, all they can do is say, because this may have classified stuff, we can't comment on it.
Again, my question remains the same, Melinda. If a person allegedly involved in the smoking gun dock is truly innocent and they have nothing to do with the document, how are they supposed to defend themselves against something like that? It's just going to cause a circular conspiracy-related
because they're training. Community. And Jim explained to me their CIA training, their intelligence training is because of their security oaths. They cannot comment in period.
Well,
they can't.
You know what?
So I said, what are you guys going to do? He said, all we can do is say no comment. That's all we can do.
So based on that logic, that type of logic, according to your logic, how is anybody going to defend themselves if they are truly innocent and have nothing to do with the smoking gun dock?
What do you mean defend themselves? No one's being accused of anything.
Well, sure. I mean, John Alexander's being accused of being a liar. Commander Miller is accused of...
that's between Shannon. You know what John's response is? No comment.
It's in more macro.
They can't comment on it. They're not going to comment on it.
In a smoking gun dock. That's
you guys.
Even
okay,
worse.
wait, you guys. I don't want to do this with you guys. We're in agreement here. They are saying so far no comment.
Well,
they're
except for Miller. Except for Miller, he's spoken to us.
They're not denying it. They're not denying it, but they're saying no comment. I know you guys talked to Willard Miller.
He's not said a word. John Alexander has not said a word.
Okay, I'm telling you what I talked to Semi-Van about that. Okay, and
there is nobody that is an authority on John Alexander except for John Alexander. No one can speak.
Okay, I'm saying him and Semi-Van talk all the time. They're friends. Okay, I'm just going with what Jim said. But they're saying no comment. They're all saying no comment. That's the point. To our 43-minute conversation was him to explain to me why, because of their security oaths, they have to say no comment, and that's the only thing they can ever say.
Let's accept that.
I'm not going to accept it. I'll let you know.
No. Let's accept that they're saying no comment.
You guys, I have no argument with you here. All I'm saying is I'm quoting the guy. That's it. I'm just quoting the guy.
Let's accept.
That's all I got.
As a researcher, that no comment means that's a roadblock. There's no point in pursuing it because that's all you're ever going to get.
John, just want to be clear. Everybody understands John Alexander has not said a word about this. And that does not mean he is involved in the dock. He has to have an opportunity to defend himself. And now he cannot.
No, he doesn't. He can say no comment. He doesn't need to defend himself. He'll say no comment for the reason Jim told me. They can't say anything else. They're bound by security oaths to say no comment.
A no comment would be a breach of security. So then how are we
Well, that's what they're saying. Look, all I can do is quote, I can quote the guy. And Dolan can quote what Hal told him. That's all we got. That's all we got.
Exactly. My point is that's all they're going to give you. So some research needs to be done around, like your research on the meeting and all that. That's great stuff. But nobody has placed Wilson in Vegas on the purported date of the meeting.
I know, Frank, I've heard you in many, many interviews bring that up. You're right. Frank, why don't you take that on? Why don't you find...
Well, I have, and I went with what I've got, and, if I have more by the next time we do a show, I'll bring it in.
You came up with something
I'm not sitting on anything. Yeah, when I get something, I go with it.
Wait, I'm sorry, Frank. I heard the beginning of the show before I went on. You did break up a little in it, so the end of it was hard to hear. Were you saying you did find evidence placing him there?
No. What I found was that the FIO, the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, the Vegas chapter, was in fact new, as is mentioned in the Wilson notes. But what is not clear is that he appeared there. It seems as though he didn't, and it seems as though in the notes it's indicated that part of the reason he is there is because of some unfinished business from when he was still on active duty,
and also Frank,
to appear at and help with getting this Vegas chapter off the ground. And there's no mention of him having appeared there in the newsletter.
Well, and Frank, the problem is even if you place him in Vegas, it's not proof.
No, it's not. You're right. It's not
proof.
Go
down this road. It's not proof he met with Eric.
Right. Exactly. It's not proof. But let's say, what if it were proven that he was in, let's say, Minneapolis, Minnesota that day?
It would be circumstantial, just like the evidence that
not necessarily.
That
depends on what the evidence is. Depends on what the evidence is.
It's circumstantial that we can put him there. Well, we can relate these to Mitchell, so these are all circumstantial things. And you guys,
not really. I mean, if he's not in Vegas, he's not in Vegas.
We're trying
that presents
to
a real
get
problem.
This together. We're trying.
So are we.
I hope I don't get attacked out there in the field at all.
It doesn't matter.
No, not at all. I think too many researchers are accepting this document at face value.
Semivan, because I'm in that unique position. So
I understand that. But what I'd like to say is, I just want to say something real quick. I find it quite hilarious, something that happened to me recently, and that is, I'm not going to mention any names. I'm just going to say what happened, and I do have witnesses regarding what happened. There were actually a multitude of them that witnessed what happened to me, and this is related to what we're talking about. I was in a group discussing the idea of hoping for more research and data, evidence, and possibly more proof. And another individual entered into that thread and personally attacked me for a very long time, and then took me onto someone else's timeline to try and prove that the smoking gun docs were real by making someone else tell me they were. That was a very high-profile person, and that worked against them when they did that, because when that high-profile person realized that this person was verbally basically abusing me and trying to attack me for my perspective.
I'm sorry that happened.
Hold on.
A lot of people are acting.
Linda, let me finish.
Yeah.
When that high-profile person realized what was going on, they then told that person this: if a researcher does not have the right to question a topic, how does that keep the topic honest? It doesn't. So then what happened after that is that same person who decided to go ahead and go on that rampage against me, which was quite hilarious, they then threatened to out that person on something that I don't know whether it was true or not, but it was something meaningless, because they didn't get their way. And something I'd like to say about that is this: I will never, ever blindly believe something without information, evidence, and or proof. And I don't care what anybody says. They are not going to kowtow me for not jumping on and becoming a bandwagoner and a fanboy of a conspiracy or a theory or a hypothetical or anything. I will believe and what I want if I happen to have an opinion. And if I want to research it, I will. And I have noticed that ever since I have contacted folks involved with the smoking gun doc, and also the alien autopsy doc, I have had a huge amount of support for people saying, yes, good, do research it, go ahead and gain the data, whatever data you may find, compile it, and then share it if you wish. I have another very small group of people who have actually for some weird reason, hated me for researching it, and have acted out against me in their own childish way. And what I have to say to that is, that's too bad if you don't like it that I'm researching these documents and interviewing people about them, because nothing is going to stop me from doing that. And another thing I'd like to say is, just because I'm researching them does not mean I'm saying, oh, these documents are fake. What I'm saying is this: it's distinctly different. I need evidence and proof that these docs are real, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, that's why I came forward, because of exactly what you're saying, with the puzzle pieces that I had, both the comments from my conversation with Jim, because that was uniquely separate, combined with that I had a document about a meeting referenced within the interview, and I felt I should come forward with something so at least I can say this part is true. Now, I'm not saying the whole thing.
I do want to jump in, and I don't want to speak for Chant, but I do want to say I'm absolutely convinced that this Admiral Wilson document is exceptionally well researched, if not genuine. I will say that it's well researched.
Oh, good. Well,
and
Frank,
your research is fantastic.
And I'm not saying I'm with you guys. I'm actually, Frank, I just completely agree with what you just said. So I think we're learning. We wish the person whoever leaked these would come forward. Maybe they will at some point. We're left with the documents and a little bit of provenance, little bit of the background, and then and so that all we can do is go forward. I'm part of a research community of individuals who agree that we should switch and focus to the content of them, because there's some really powerful things. If this is a real interview and Wilson really said this and he went out and tried to really find these things.
Let's be clear here that even if the document itself is fake, it may be telling some very interesting truths contained within it.
And that too. And if it is real, and if
I'm very open to that, by the way.
NIDS, I'll throw out my whole scenario. If it's NIDS/working group, /BAS, sending Eric, okay, go check this out. And he goes and checks it out and interviews the guy and then copies it for everyone. If in fact that's the background story that placed him there, and Chant had made the connection to place him there. Okay, let's say all that's, true. He interviews him. He shares it with everyone in NIDS. Obviously, they had an interest, a very vested interest in the results of that. And the guy said, look, I looked into this and I was shut out. The main core story here of this document, if it's real, and no one lose track of, well, why does this even matter? First off, a guy who was head of the intelligence for the assistant director of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the position is N2, was shut out from looking into this. That's huge. And then he was told a little bit, and the little bit he was told is a time bomb. That's a time bomb, the little pieces he was told, if in fact that's true, and if in fact he was truly told that. Okay, so if he was told that, that's a time bomb. But it also suggests, well, if they weren't reading him into the whole program, they're certainly not telling him everything. So they're just telling him a little bit because they probably, given his position, and he said, this is my purview. You guys fall under me. This would be my job. I'd be your boss's boss on this stuff.
And that was discussed prior to these docs, just to fill people in if they're not aware. Mitchell and Greer spoke publicly about this meeting in the aftermath of it, long before these docs ever came out.
That was the initial meeting where they were
Mitchell, Greer,
telling him all about the disclosure project and what they were doing and the people coming forward and what was not, wherever they were all briefing him on, caused him to go, maybe I should ask around. And then he spent some time asking around, was told just a little, but not being able to be read in or told more, apparently made him furious and angry. Oak, having had probably, being in naval intelligence, that's Oak Chant's background, worked with him, knew he was mad and said, hey, to his buddies at NIDS, hey, you guys should talk to this guy. You should hear what I'm hearing from him. It all makes perfect sense to me.
Okay.
And so he says, okay, well, we'll send Eric. Eric's a good guy. He'll like Eric. We'll send Eric. I can just imagine. I am imagining, but it just, to me, it all makes perfect sense. And then so they send Eric, and Eric interviews him, and he shares the documents with them. And someone who got that document is connected to someone who released it. And again, I go to that likely source being in the files of Edgar Mitchell, because after his death, a couple people had access to his files. So there you go.
Okay.
So, and that's what I'm offering up. That's as much as I know. But to understand the whole scenario, the group, why Eric was there, what's the Oak Shannon thing, all that. If people watched my presentation that I, gave, and that's not about me. It's about the information there. It's about 28 years of work that Randy and I did. You're going to get a huge insight on what's going on.
Now, we've gone over 2 hours here, so we do want to wrap up. You've been fantastic,
Thank
Melinda.
You guys.
I know things got heated a little bit at certain points in time. We love your research on the back end. And if nobody else wants to do it, we'll continue on.
And I think the three of us here are in a mutual admiration society.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we're emotionally involved, and that's okay because we care, because we're passionate about the subject.
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
We can put our emotions aside and go, okay, let's stick with the facts. Let's stick with, the evidence. And I applaud you guys for addressing this. A lot of the field doesn't care about this right now. And to me, that's a shame, because I think they're missing the point. The point is that, again, the findings of Wilson, if in fact this interview happened, let's just go to the Wilson document. I'll start with that. In the Wilson document, if this, conversation stuff happened and Wilson really was shut out from these things, that's huge. It speaks to how the cover-up happens. It explains how some of the cover-up happens, how it's privatized, how it's gone to private industry. That's huge. And then the document, the people telling him this mention MJ12. So he's saying they told him about MJ12, which is here you have a total independent document suggesting the reality of MJ12. Okay, then also, besides it being the reality of MJ12, besides it being about this guy and his level being the position of J2, not having access to it, and how the compartmentalization works. But what is the information doesn't have access to? Crash retrieved technology, working craft in our possession, and a reverse engineering program being managed by private industry on behalf of a secret or government shadow space program. I mean, it's all spelled out in this, if this is real. And that's why it's important. Do we know? Well, everyone could say, well, we already knew that. Yeah, but how many times have we had documentation in support of what we, quote, know or what we figured out? Very rare, okay? And this is actually a document in support of that. And then the additional letter gets into NIDS and their interest and abduction research, which, like I said, to Randy and I is so big, and and free and everything, and their involvement. And then the original thing release speaks to the Santilli stuff. Now it could be, and someone said, well, did they actually think that was real? And I said, look, back when those emails happened, the majority of ufology thought it was real, so they could have been looking into it. Do they still feel that way about it now? Who knows? Maybe they don't still feel about it that way. Maybe at the time they did, but doesn't mean they feel that way now. It just means, like all of ufology was believing it back then, we didn't have all the facts to make a decision, so they were talking based upon the information they had. And I'd be very surprised if the individuals, and I should call it Jim Semivan, and say, okay, that first thing, do any of you guys actually feel that of course, then he'd say no comment, because you know what? He couldn't even say how they feel about the autopsy film or the whole Santilli story. He said he probably couldn't even comment on it because, again, if one word, or let alone quoting him, a sentence in there is covert, is classified, they can't talk about it. So he'd probably say, we don't have a position on it. He'd probably say that.
And I'm glad you brought up the Santilli film. I just want to go ahead and make a comment on that regarding earlier today I had a talk with Dave Altman, a wonderful person, and he told me right after he spoke to Ray Santilli that because he actually contacted him, and actually nobody had contacted him. So kudos to him for having done his research and due diligence regarding doing something nobody had done before. And a letter that Ray wrote back to him, it was an email. It says, Dave, thank you for the link. I have always maintained the alien autopsy footage is real and that my story in respect of its acquisition is true. Yes, we restored and enhanced parts of the footage, but it doesn't alter the significance of the film and what it represents. I have purposely kept away from further comment, but I'm very pleased that official documents are now surfacing, which help verify the events of 1947 and the film, which I still have. I have remained confident over the years that evidence would surface in support of the film, and all I needed to do was wait. Regards. And it was Ray who said that to him, Ray Santilli. So that's some interesting news that came out tonight. And thank you, Dave, very much for having contacted Ray, and would like to state that I also want to say it's very important if people get to Sedona, Arizona, to please contact Melinda Leslie. Do one of her tours. I plan on doing it myself. Sedona is one of the most beautiful parts of Arizona, and she does an absolutely lovely tour. She has military style binoculars that have night vision, so folks can actually see the beautiful sky and see the UFOs above, and satellites as well, along with anything else that might be up in the sky that's worth looking at. Melinda, you mentioned that you do that at dusk in Sedona, and it depends on the time of year. We only have about 2 minutes left here. Did you want to just mention a little bit about that lovely tour you do?
Yeah. I mean, I guarantee sightings your money back, and it's a good thing we really see stuff, or I'd go broke in a hurry. But I do. About a year into it, we were seeing stuff every time. I never dreamt in a million years when I started doing these tours, we'd have sightings every time. But we do. And it's not just satellite, folks. I spend a half hour in the beginning educating everybody on everything up in the sky. And probably 15 minutes of that half hour is all about satellites. So you guys know when you're seeing them. I've taken out many satellite experts. I've learned the restrictions, what they can do, what they can't do. And we see things that stop, turn, change direction, fly in formations. We've seen objects glowing all amber, all blue, all green, which is ionized air of a huge electrical field. We flash them with the laser. We've had objects flash back. We go 1, 2, 3. They go 1, 2, 3. This kind of thing. We've seen fully structured craft. Big discs, big ovals, great big triangles, big cylinders, big boomerang shapes. On 24 of the tours, 36 structured objects. 36 structured objects on 24 of the tours. Luckily, we always see stuff, like I said, or I'd go broke in a hurry. And that's even discounting all the satellites. We're seeing stuff that clearly is doing things satellites can't do. Anyway, so I love doing it. I've taken out, as you said earlier, over 7,500 people. I've done 1,000 as of last night. Last night was tour number 1,050. So as of right now, that's where I'm at.
The other thing I want to let everybody know is a wonderful new film documentary, Extraordinary, The Seating. I did share the link also, just so you know, the 3 links you shared with us tonight, Melinda. Frank actually is sharing them in the summary beneath the post, and I also shared them in the chat. So it's a new film documentary, Extraordinary, The Seating. And to see the film's trailer, go ahead and click on one of those links. And also Melinda's website, which is UFOsightingtours.com. That's UFOsighting.tours.com. Melinda, thank you for having been on the show. We actually interviewed you, I think it was on the 14th of this year. So it was 2/14 of this year, I believe it was. And it was a lovely interview. It was about Mill Labs. And we look forward to having the privilege and honor of interviewing you again. Thank you for having been with us this evening.
And I appreciate that you guys are willing to have such a lively discussion with me. We can agree to disagree on some points, and yet we're all in this together. We're all equally passionate about the truth of this subject, and I think we're definitely, like I said, a mutual admiration society between the 3 of us, and I have nothing but respect for you guys and what you do, and I very much appreciate coming on the show.
Absolutely.
We are grateful and honored and privileged to have you on our show. Thank you, Melinda.
It was fun.
Thank you.
It was very lively tonight.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was.
It was fun. All right, guys.
Thank you.
So, all right. So,
thank you.
Thanks again. And Chant, we're going to wrap this up. I do want to reiterate the find from earlier. It's at the top of the video. So if you missed it, go back and check that out. It is information from the AFIO newsletter from back in 2002, And it is very interesting in terms of the Las Vegas chapter being a new chapter as the documents represent, but not indicating that Admiral Wilson was there for their first meeting, which happened in October of 2002. So there's that. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm glad I got there out there with it. If still they don't have Wilson in Vegas, and that's where he needs to be for these docs to be legit, and nobody seems to have that just yet. So that's all we've got for now. We'll have more when we get it. We're not going to sit on anything. When we get it, you're going to find out all about it.
Yes, and I would like to make a little comment, but I'm not going to reveal anything. But I would, if everybody is listening right now, I would definitely listen in on Sunday, because we have a special guest on that day that is going to really be very interesting. And let me put it this way. This guest has to do with the current trend that's going on right now in the UFO community, and that is the smoking gun docs and the alien autopsy emails. We have a guest from one of those docs. Actually, it would be from, no, that would be correct, Frank, right? From one of those docs.
From one of those docs, yes.
Yes,
ma'am.
from one of those docs, who will be on our show on Sunday. And that is going to be a fascinating interview. So we look forward to that. That will be at noon West Coast time on Sunday. So please tune in to that show.
All right. Thanks again for joining in, everybody. Goodbye. Have a nice night.